Hey, everybody. This is Joshua Luttrell. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Veterans for Cannabis podcast today. I'm extremely excited to have in our midst Dr. Shelby Ellison. Dr. Ellison, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing so very well. You are a faculty associate at the Department of Horticulture at UW Madison.
Indeed.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So, Dr. Ellison, for our listeners, if you don't mind, give them a little understanding of where you're at geographically located in the country.
So I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, which is at the top of the country. No, we're in the Midwest. We're one of the northernmost states in the Midwest. So nice cold winter and a nice warm summer, and it's pretty humid in the summertime too.
Oh, I can't even imagine. So tell me how many feet of snow you have now.
So much. We just had a big snowstorm on Saturday, Sunday. I think we got about 7 inches in Madison. So
Wow.
probably up to about 2.5 feet total of snow for the year.
Nice. Well, I do have to throw a little homage out to my hometown in Rabun County, Georgia. We had 5.5, almost 6 inches of snow this past weekend, and Atlanta had 2 inches.
That seems unheard of.
It was. It was pretty crazy. So really nuts this time of year. So, Dr. Ellison, you did your PhD in genetics at University of California.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about genetics. Is this plant genetics, human genetics?
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated by genetics. I went to undergrad here at UW Madison for genetics and was fortunate enough to learn about the field of plant breeding and plant genetics when I was in undergrad and decided to pursue it for my PhD. So I went out to California, and the first crop that I worked in was common beans. So all the edible beans that you're used to. I worked in beans looking at genes that are important for agronomically important traits. Specifically for my PhD, I was looking at growth habits. So determinate, which are like bush type beans, versus indeterminate, which are climbing genes. And then, I got very, very interested in wanting to, it was neat. I saw so much application for what I was doing, actually trying to figure out what genes controlled the traits that were very important to farmers. So I've pursued that ever since.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's so great to have a geneticist, essentially. Are you a geneticist, or you just focus on genes?
I'm a geneticist. Yep.
Okay, beautiful. So when we talk about the genetics of the hemp plant and cannabis in general, I'm a firm believer that cannabis is cannabis is cannabis, any way you look at it. And I explain it all the time, like a Shih Tzu and a Bulldog are dogs. They're just different breeds of dogs. That's the way medical cannabis is perceived versus industrial hemp, the 0.3% THC. So in your mind's eye, is cannabis cannabis cannabis, or is it really sativa, indica, hybrids, all this great stuff?
Yeah, so I think the dog analogy is great. So be it hemp or marijuana, they're all cannabis sativa. So kind of the definition that we use is if they can cross with each other, then they're the same species. And we know that all of these types can cross freely with each other, which sometimes is to the detriment of people trying to farm for cannabinoids. But because of that, we say they're all the same species. So I believe that cannabis is cannabis is cannabis. And pretty much things that define it tend to be human constructs or legal definitions, such as the 0.3% THC cutoff between marijuana and hemp.
That is a perfect explanation. I knew I'd be asking the right person. So, you and I have been talking about this for a little bit, and we look at the cloning opportunity and what is going to be the market for Wisconsin for purchasing clones this year. How does somebody, if they want to get into this industry, how do they find the right plants to grow? What is that process like for the individual farmer?
Yeah, it's really tough out there for it. A lot of the burden is placed on the farmer right now because there's lots of people who want to make money and maybe don't necessarily have the skills or resources to be doing what they're doing. So
Right.
might be providing some inaccurate information. But my advice for anyone who's getting into farming for CBD or any of the other cannabinoids is, it's definitely, I think, purchasing either feminized seeds or clones that are female are, I say that because sometimes people sell male clones, but
Oh
female
my
clones or
gosh.
feminized seed is definitely the way to go if you're just getting into this field, because once you throw males in the mix, it's very, very difficult to keep on top of the males and to make sure that they don't pollinate your crop. So then when it comes down between purchasing seed or clones, seed is going to be cheaper, but typically we don't see many people in Wisconsin direct seeding
Sure.
the seed. Most people need access to a greenhouse to start in the greenhouse and then transplant about a month later. So that there's an additional cost to that. So it's really up to what resources you have available and how much money you're willing to spend on the initial clones and seeds. But
Well,
some of the other,
no. I want to definitely ask about the growing season and why people would start in the greenhouses first. But what you said, I've got to say, when I said, a second ago, last year we bought our clones from we thought reputable source, and he was cloning male and female plants both. About 60% of our clones were males this year, so we lost our entire crop to fertilization. Now, granted, yes, we made lemonade with our lemons, right? We got tons of seeds out of it. We got some solid. We know the genetics are good because they turned out so beautiful, but they were full of seeds, obviously. So a trusted, reputable operation that you're getting your clones from or sourcing your seeds from is key. So that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and
growing
I
season.
just wanted to say that's what we're telling everyone. So whoever you're purchasing your seeds and clones from, ask them to provide you with references. So don't just take their word for it. If you're going to be investing that much money, they can provide you with some references along with the COA and everything that says that it's a compliant product or seed.
100%.
Make sure you get references.
That is so true, and I'm just harping on that. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for saying that. So when you look at the growing season in Wisconsin, it's fairly short versus I'm sitting in Georgia right now. My wife's still active duty, so we're at Robins Air Force Base, and we've got a heck of a growing season in South Georgia. Wisconsin's a little different.
Yes. So the most we're going to get outdoors is one growing season. So,
okay.
But it fits pretty nicely. But that was really important. A lot of people last year. So we've had 2018 and 2019. We've been able to grow hemp in Wisconsin, but it really, really, just like the rest of the country, kind of blew up last year. And people were sourcing genetics from all over. And one of the important things with the photo period is that we have very long days, and it doesn't, maybe get below 14 hours of day length until maybe mid-August. So for a lot of the varieties that need that transition to the shorter day period, they might not flower until September, in which case they might not finish until October, and we start having freeze days in October. So we need to be very careful about making sure that we have varieties that will finish hopefully by the end of September to really guarantee that they're going to get out of the field. And obviously there are the autoflower varieties, but there are a lot of full-term photoperiod sensitive varieties that seem to work in Wisconsin. So I think that should work too, but we'll just get one crop, and then certainly there are people who do greenhouse operations all year long as well. But that really limits who can tap into that industry.
What kind of research do you guys have on the wings? What are you doing right now to really determine the strains that are working well and going to work well in the atmosphere that you all have?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the first things, my first year in hemp, so I had mentioned that I've worked in crops. My PhD was in beans. Then I came to Wisconsin. I actually was working in carrots. And then last year was my first year in hemp. So I'm fairly new to this as well. But that's just because there haven't been, university positions in cannabis previously.
Well, we
so
are all new to this, right?
Yes. Indeed. And so last year, I just went to as many farmer fields as I could. I collected data on what seemed to be working here, what was adapted to the photo period, to the higher humidity. So similar to Georgia, I mean, there's going to be a lot more disease pressure in regions of the country where there's higher humidity. That's not the case necessarily in the Pacific Northwest or in Colorado. So we need sources of disease resistance, and we also need the photoperiod adapted varieties. And so we've done some variety trialing. We started growing different varieties just to see what does well, taking yield data and cannabinoid content data, and then really just learning how to grow the crop. How do you space it? What do you do for weed control, for insect control? And then pretty much ramping up to really, really do a large, well-replicated variety trial for 2020 and get some really good data for everybody around the country, or around the Midwest. But that's one nice thing is we're working with different universities around the country to kind of see what is well adapted regionally and what is well adapted kind of across the entire United States.
So do you guys have a relationship with the University of Georgia and Tuskegee by any chance?
So I believe I cannot tell you offhand anyone I'm working with in Georgia, but I believe that there is a member, someone from Georgia that comes to a multi-state project that we're working on. But
Okay.
Georgia's first year growing was last year?
Last
or
year.
This year?
No, last year.
Yeah.
That was, well, yeah, 'cause we're in 2020 now. That's right. So
Yes,
last
exactly.
2019.
Yes, but I have heard that there's research starting at Tuskegee, so I'm very interested to learn at what's happening there.
Well, beautiful. So what I'll do, I'll connect you, and this is for our listeners too. So Tuskegee and UGA are coming up to speed on some really great research opportunities that are happening. I'm going to Tuskegee next week, so I'll reconvene back with you and make sure that we all connect each other, and then UGA as
Yes.
well. Because the key
Absolutely.
is understanding what varieties work out well in what regions, because we know that a variety in your region is not going to perform the same as it does down here in the South. So
Exactly.
we got to figure this out, right?
Yes. So
What
definitely, and then also finding university partners kind of within your region. So kind
Absolutely.
of, who else is working on it.
Absolutely. When you say a large scale research project this year, what are you looking to do? Are you guys going to grow it yourself, or do you want to partner with farms? What's the process, and how can we help, and how can our listeners help?
Yeah, so we have several university research sites that have land, and the biggest thing with collecting the data is you want the data to be high quality. So you want to have replicated research occurring across the state, and you want the data that you're collected to be comparable from one site to another. So we're going to have research trials on 3 of our different research farms, and they all have different soil types, and they're all slightly different climates. So we'll be able to see a little bit of localized adaptation there. But then
Beautiful.
we definitely want to work with some farmers who, I know a bunch of farmers last year, and they seem to be, they knew how to grow the crop really well. They're good farmers. So getting some of those varieties on the farm to actually be managed how they would be normally managed under production by a farmer, that's really important data to collect to see if they're performing the same on farm as they are on university trials.
Are you seeing the farmers that are growing mainly for CBD production for the large flowers? Is anybody growing for hemp fiber now? What's the mix?
Yeah, so I was involved with a survey that looked at as many farmers that I could contact that grew hemp in 2019, and the vast majority, I think it's 95% of farmers reported growing for CBD versus
Wow.
grain and seed. Grain and fiber. I think that will change a little bit moving into 2020 because, there's a lot of biomass sitting around right now with not
Yes,
anywhere
there
to
is.
put it. So I think people are going to diversify their flowers. So some people are going to be doing the CBG genetics, but I think that there's going to be more people planting for seed and for grain and for fiber, and that it's a little less risky as well, just because the input cost and the labor cost and the harvesting cost is all cheaper. So I think that might appeal to some of the farmers who were a little overwhelmed at growing the hemp for CBD production this year.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. With
So
that said, though, I mean, it's questionable if those markets will be built